So my name is Michelle. In a nutshell, I work as a psychic medium, a health coach, a life coach. I do vibrational healing, Reiki, sound healing, and I do these free Q&As once a month. So it comes in a variety of different ways for me. One thing that most people don't realize is the subtlety of those messages for most people, especially adults. So for me, some of the most meaningful things I've ever said to anyone have been it my own thought, basically, except it was more random than that. And after practicing for a while, I realized that those thoughts that were psychic, they kind of felt like they were coming into my head sideways. That's the only way I can describe it for me. And so sometimes I'll just have a random thought and I'll just be like, that's not me. I know that's not me. And so I've gotten to the point where I'll just say everything because, like I said, some of the most meaningful things I've ever said to anyone have just been like random thoughts to me. And that's really how it works for the most part for people. So most people, they think of like, say, like clairaudience, the ability to hear spirit. Um, they expect it to be like, oh, I heard that with my ear, but no one's here. But really, the more common end of that is, oh, why did I have that weird thought? Or with clairvoyance, the ability to see information from spirit. Most people think, oh, well, I should be able to see that spirit standing right next to me here. Or why can't I see the information with my eyes? But more commonly, the other end of the spectrum is, why did I have a thought that felt like a vision? And so for me, it comes as sideways thoughts, I call them. And sometimes I feel like I hear them. Sometimes I feel like I see them. Remember one time, Frank, I saw something like an outline of something on the wall. And I drew it on my paper, and you said, oh, I know what that is. And it turned out to be a significant message. So sometimes it'll come like that. Sometimes I just have an urge to write something down and I don't know what it means. And so I'll just say it to a person and we'll see what it means after that. Let's see. Sometimes I get feelings about things. Sometimes those feelings are physical sensations. Like one time, a spirit who had died had a lot of problems with bloating in their belly. And before the lady came to her appointment, I started getting bellyache, and my it just started getting more and more bloated. And I'm like, this is crazy. I haven't eaten anything. I don't know why this is happening. And once I gave her the message about her husband being there and her validating that that one of his biggest problems at the end of his life was bloating, it just completely went away. And so that's a sign of physical mediumship, and it's real. It can happen. It happens to people. Sometimes I'll feel emotions, and I'll describe those emotions to people. Um, a good example today was a spirit came, a mother of someone, when I was doing a reading, and suddenly I just saw a white gardenia. It was just a white flower the shape of a gardenia. And I couldn't get the word gardenia, but it was really clear in my vision what that was. And when I described it to her, she said that was her mom's favorite flower. So that's in a nutshell, I think, how it comes from me. And I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions on that question or hear any comments if you have them. Just unmute yourself. And if not, I'll look at the next question. Okay. So let's see here. What is the most effective ways to awaken psychic gifts that were shut down during childhood or teenager years? And that's a great question, and it's a really, really common question that I get. This question is repeated several times in my email for this session. And there are a lot of things you can do. Those abilities aren't gone. They are just dormant, really. And with practice, they can come back. So the number one thing to do is to quiet the mind. And that's the thing that's kind of hard for people is they say, I can't meditate, I have thoughts. Well, you're going to have thoughts. That's what your brain is here to do. The point of meditation, though, is to slow those thoughts down. And then you start to notice what thoughts may be not yours. And that's what happened to me was through meditation. That's when it started to feel like the thought was coming sideways. And it's, I know that may sound a little weird, but it was just like, wow, that just felt like it came from the right side. And every time I can recognize it that way now. So, um, Quieting your mind allows you to tune out of what we call the bandwidth or perception of this physical reality that we get with our physical senses. There's a lot more energy that we've measured with our equipment than what we can pick up with the human eyes, ears, smell, taste, all that. Like there's sounds dogs hear that we would never hear, right? There's stuff like that. So and there's spiritual stuff, there's spirits all around us all the time, and they can see us even though we can't really see them very well, if at all. So quieting the mind shuts off the physical perception to a large degree, and that's when we start to notice what else is out there. We start to hear voices, we start to see faces, we start to see colors, we start to get more information when we tune out the physical senses. So that is a huge benefit of meditation, along with it changes your brain waves. So the more you meditate, where you're just sitting and trying to quiet your mind, just observing your thoughts, waiting for the next one, tuning back into your breath or to some sort of um, music or what's called binaural beats can be really helpful. Then um, those perceptions will start to grow more and more, and you'll start to realize what abilities you have more strongly than others. And wherever you put focus, wherever you focus, like say, okay, I want to build my clairaudience, then I'm going to try to do clairaudience exercises. Like one is where you are in a quiet space or you're in nature and you just try to listen as far as you can out, like to pick up every single sound you can pick up on. And when you strengthen your ability to hear physical sounds in that way while your mind is quiet and not really thinking much, that actually sharpens your ability to hear spirit. Quieting your mind allows you to tune out of the bandwidth of physical perception, which allows you to pick up on the energies that are out there, which include the vibrations coming off of people's hearts, the information coming from their minds, the information coming from our higher selves and our guides, and spirits that are around us as well. Also, it changes our brain waves so that when we do it on a regular basis, our brains actually start to slow down and they don't race the same way anymore, which allows us really to be perceiving those extra energies on a more of a continuous basis. And then one other thing that comes to mind with regard to this is there's a scientist named Dan Winter, and he understands the physics of bliss, death, the soul, and he's proving it scientifically, the way our energy, our electromagnetic field changes with what's called focused attention. So say you're doing an exercise, you're quieting the mind and you're trying to hear all the sounds that you can. That's focused attention in your brain. And what happens is an implosion, a closing in, the opposite of an explosion, but inward explosion of energy happens. And that changes our wavelength of energy from, I don't want to get too scientific, but transverse waves of energy to what's called longitudinal. And that puts us into the array of psychic abilities. It puts us into those other energies in a way that we understand them better. So doing psychic exercises like visualizing things or trying to hear things has an additional benefit along with meditation for you bringing those abilities back. And when I started this happened to me, I was a really psychic kid, but I turned it off because I got sent to a psychiatrist at an early age. So when I tried to turn it back on, I really had to work at it. And one of the things I had to work at a lot was clairvoyance, seeing information from spirit. And this exercise where you try to visualize either numbers or letters over and over again. You just try to visualize them. You tell yourself, okay, I know what an A looks like with my eyes closed. There's no reason I can't see this A right now. And you may not see it at first because you're not used to doing that, but draw it with your finger. Give yourself like, just be easy on yourself. Like, okay, this will come one day. I'm just going to try this every day, try to see the A. As soon as you see one part of the A, just be like, okay, great, I saw that. I'm making progress because it's like building a muscle. It'll build that clairvoyant muscle for you to give it credit. And then one day I was like, oh my gosh, I started seeing lights. Like my eyes were closed and it was like I was moving through space and this bright, beautiful light show was happening. And then a hole opened up and someone started talking to me through it. And so it can really increase your abilities to add that focused attention into a meditation. Let me think what else might be beneficial. Well, I mentioned binaural beats. And so binaural beats, also known as hemisync. And there's a website called hemisync.com, HEMI hyphen SYNC.com. And they are tones that use either like earbuds like this or headphones. You have to have earbuds or headphones or it won't work because tones go into each ear differently, which does something to the brain and puts you in a more of a meditative and a psychic state. And I noticed that I can also turn the light shows on with my eyes closed if I listen to the binaural beats. And once in a while, if I'm really into it and I'm doing it regularly, the lights actually move to the beats in my ears. So that's a pretty good way to start to reawaken psychic abilities. One other thing that comes to mind is automatic writing. Automatic writing is just the process of writing. Like I said earlier, sometimes I just have an urge to write a word. It's just letting your hand do the writing, letting spirit use your hand to do the writing. And it's one of the fastest ways to develop mediumship abilities. And everyone can do it. It's really one of the easiest ways to get started with mediumship. And you don't just want to, write random stuff down all the time. You want to ask questions that you can validate. It's part of the process of learning. If we don't validate what we're doing here psychically, we have no idea if it's psychic or if it's our mind. So because it's so subtle for most people, especially adults. So what I did in the beginning was say I wanted to learn animal communication. Everyone who would let me, I would just say, hey, can you send me a picture of your dog, your cat, your horse, your bunny, whatever it is, and let me see what I pick up on. And then I'm going to get back to you. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to get back to you. You let me know if I was right or wrong. And through that process, I learned so much about how it was going to come through for me. Here's one other example is the first time I ever did automatic writing. I was connecting with my husband's mom and I said, tell me something I wouldn't know so he knows it's not my mind. And I just had the urge to write 16, the number 16 and toe. And so I wrote TOE. And I asked him what happened to your toe when you were 16, and he said nothing. And he didn't remember at first. And then he did remember and he said, I know what it was. When I was 16, I was living in upstate New York. I had just learned to drive. My parents were in the back seat, and I was turning into the driveway full of snow, and I did exactly what I was told not to do. And they got out of the car and walked away laughing and said, now you got to get it towed. And so it was such a valuable experience to me to write TOE down and realize that I wasn't wrong at all. I just misinterpreted it. And so that was a great exercise. And the more you do automatic writing, where you can validate the answers with another person about what you're getting, the more valuable it becomes. And it will teach you in a way that no class can teach you. So that's another way to do it. And then there's things like cleaning the body up, of course. By the time we get to be adults, not only is our energy usually, I'll just say messed up by traumatic experiences, by picking up on things from other people, by substances we're exposed to and substances we consume. Energy work really helped me enhance my psychic abilities. And so when I send the recording, what I'll do is I'll put a link to a lady I like who demonstrates energy exercises that we can all do on ourselves. And those were life-changing for me. So that's really helpful as an adult. And then cleaning up the body of processed foods. Processed foods, they calcify the pineal gland, which is associated with clairvoyance. It's called the seat of the soul. And I remember when I was a new ER nurse, like every patient over 50 had calcifications in their pineal gland. And I mean, I still remember it very clearly. It was a long time ago because it made such a big impact on me. And then I learned that there's all these different neurotoxins that can um, affect the pineal gland function. And so processed foods is one of them. And I just wrote an article. You can go on the website at sacredawaken.com and try to remember the name of the article. It's the most recent one that's on there. Oh, spiritual awakening symptoms. And I talk about different things that are going to calcify and mess up the pineal gland. There's a whole section in that article about that. But basically chemicals and processed foods are the big things. And then connecting. I think this might be the last part of this answer. Connecting all the time or as much as possible with spiritual information, practicing spiritual exercises, connecting with people who talk about spirituality, near-death experiences, their own psychic experiences, listening to psychic shows, even though they're for entertainment. A lot of times they only show the best of the best. But they can be really motivational. And so I watched a lot of Long Island Medium. And every time I would go to work to do readings, I would watch an episode of Long Island Medium ahead of time. And it just got my vibe up and it empowered me. It put me in that headspace. It made me feel less weird. So just being connected all the time to other people, even if it's by video, is really helpful for reawakening your abilities. So any questions on that? Okay. Let's see here. I've got some more questions. If you get a psychic vision, how do you know it's accurate? You don't always know. And that is the importance of validation. So here's an example of what I do. There's no way during a reading I'm going to know if every single thing I'm saying to a person is correct. There's no way. Even the military has used psychics forever, and even the best military grade psychics were only measured accurate at about like at the highest 80 or so percent. So what I do is I validate throughout the session. So I'll say somebody says I want to talk about my daughter. Well, I'll ask spirit, how old is their daughter? And I'll write it on my paper. And then I'll say, how old is your daughter? And if I get it right or within a year, I'm like, okay, I'm starting to be on the right track. Or today somebody said, I want to talk about my cat, and I saw a black cat. I said, is your cat black? And they said yes. And so I was like, okay, if I had seen a white cat, then I would not have trusted that I was connecting yet. And so then I'll get the next thing and the next thing. So if I can get some of those things right, the things I can validate, then I trust the other information that's coming through around that. Does that make sense the way that I said that? So that I learned that from my mentor, and that really a reading is not very valuable unless you are doing that sort of validation. And gosh, sometimes people are asking the most important questions for their life, and I don't want to get it wrong. So I um I do the validation. You don't always know if the vision is accurate. Our minds will always give us what we want. And so if we have any kind of bias or judgment about whatever it is, or if we have an emotional attachment to what the answer is, or the answer might be, we will influence it. And that is why if I have a serious situation in my personal life, I go to someone else for a reading. I don't try to I do get the information myself, but then I go to someone else because I know that my mind will give me what I want and that it can be really hard to override that. So, the more you practice like clairvoyance exercises, the more you practice doing readings basically for other people, like asking for a picture of their animal or their friend or their loved one, or whatever it is, and writing down like the visions you get around that, then validating how that's accurate or how that's not accurate. That's going to teach you um, how things come through for you, and then that's going to let you know more about what's accurate and what's not accurate. I'm not sure if I said that in a way that made sense. Did that make sense? Okay. So the part two of this question is also what's the science behind it? And I'm assuming this means what's the science behind psychic visions? Um, that's probably a multifaceted answer. I'll start by saying that spirit doesn't give us words, they give us energy, and our brains convert it into something, whether that's a picture of a black cat, whether that is a word, whether that's a feeling, whatever it is, they give us energy and our brains make it into something else, and then we express that. And so there are a lot of ways we pick up on that information telepathically. So one way is heart math. The Heart Math Institute, and you can just go to heartmath.com, heartmath.com, and they talk all about this. The vibration of the human heart each person has its own signature, and it's been measured like at least 8 feet out from the body, and they determine that those heart signatures interact with each other. And I believe that empathy and in part clairsentience, the ability to feel information from spirit, is coming from the vibration of the heart. So that is part of the science behind it. And here's an interesting thing about the heart and visions. So there was a person who received a heart transplant, and they started having visions of being murdered. And the visions were so accurate that they actually worked with the police department to solve the murder of the person's heart they received. So there's some science there. The heart seems to be an organ of higher consciousness. And then the other science that comes to mind is exactly what I said earlier about focused human attention causes an implosion within the DNA, and changes our EMF, our electromagnetic signature, and ability to penetrate out and perceive information with other than the physical senses. And that science you can look at Dan Winter's one of many very very complex websites. But if you just go to danwinter.com or Physics of Soul. He's got about 1 million different websites with a lot of different physics and stuff, but he's proving this, what's happening in the brain with this implosion, and how it has to do with spirits getting stuck. It has to do with people successfully surviving, taking their consciousness through death. So his science is very interesting. And then also there's another very scientific person named Tom Campbell. He has a lot of videos out where he talks about the nature of this reality and consciousness and how it's connected. And so I recommend, if you want the science part of it, he's probably a good person to listen to. But some people find it a little bit too mechanistic. They find it a little bit like it diminishes our divinity. I don't think it does, but the way that he describes it, I can see why people think that. So there's a lot of science behind it, and they're finding out more and more. And there's also, here's some more science I just remembered. So we change the reality with our thoughts. Check it out. There was an experiment. I think it was a Russian experiment. It's hard to find, but I did find a reference for it. And what they did was they took light particles or photons, which are seemingly the basic unit of this reality where we are, is photons, and they took them and they put them in a vacuum tube. So there's nothing else in this tube, just photons, light particles, and they watched it and they just observed the photons seemed to be like they were random in the tube. And then they took a piece of DNA, human DNA, and they stuck it in that tube, and the photons arranged themselves in a picture of DNA. To add to that, there was another experiment where they took samples of DNA from people, two different groups of people. One group of people said, I'm stressed out all the time. The other group of people said, no, life is pretty easy for me. And they found that the DNA was very different between those two people. Tightly woven or wound up DNA on the stressed out people, and not very tightly wound up DNA on the non-stressed people. So if our DNA is changed by our thoughts and the reality is changed by our DNA, then we're pushing information out into the reality. And why wouldn't we be able to feel it? We're creating in the energy field before we see it in the physical. And I think that we're able to perceive that. Empathy, the ability to feel information, is a basic survival mechanism. And all the animals have it. And they're all telepathic as well. All right. Any questions on that explanation? Did that make sense? Okay. So let's see here. Okay. This, I think I've already answered this one, but let me just address it. When I practice energy healing, I receive intuitive insights or answers, but they feel sometimes unclear or incomplete. What can I do to enhance the clarity and specificity of these messages? I think it's all these things that I've gone over already with regard to meditating, quieting the mind, cleaning up the body, practicing, validating the information that you're getting is going to teach you about it. And then thanking your guides. Some people say ask your guides. I say thank them as if they're already doing it, because they probably are. And that's how we manifest. Thank your guides for assisting you with keeping your mind out of the way and allowing the information to come through cleanly. Honestly, the more you practice psychic exercises, the easier this is, the better you're going to get at it. Starting psychic exercises like with yes, no questions, learning what yes feels like, what no feels like, and just establishing that connection with spirit with yes or no things that you can validate is invaluable. So some of you probably already heard this, but one of the first ways I did this was in a place where I used to work. we only had 3 places along the parking lot where the practitioners of the building were supposed to park. And so before I turned the corner and could see that area, I would say, I thank my guides for helping me practice my clairaudience, my ability to hear spirit. And I'd say, yes or no, is there a place to park in one of the first 3 spots? Whatever my first thought was, yes, no, I just remembered it. Turn the corner. Was I right? Was I wrong? If I got it right, yay, great job. Thank you, spirit, because that builds that muscle, right? And it builds the connection, and it builds my confidence, and it raises my vibration, which helps me access the information next time. And um, and if I get it wrong, and I remember what it felt like when I had that thought of yes. And then if I get it wrong, same thing, remember what it felt like. And then thank you for the practice. I appreciate it, even though I didn't perceive it accurately or my mind got in the way. What did it feel like? Like, did I have some sort of emotional attachment to parking in one of those first 3 spots? Was my car full of stuff and I didn't want to walk down the street? Was it raining? Did my ankle hurt? Now, there could be a myriad of reasons. And so you look at it and you just do it every day or as much as possible over and over and over again. And I'll tell you, for most people within a short period of time, you're going to start to notice that you're going to start to notice some reasons why you get it right, some reasons why you get it wrong, how it felt. It'll progress for you the more you do it. You can do it with grocery store lines, you can do it parking places, you can do it with coffee stores, who has the shortest line, this place or this place. The important thing is get your mind out of the way by not having any emotional attachment to the answer. So, all right, let's see. Practice, practice, practice is that answer. I have a deep connection, or I'm sorry, a deep desire to connect with angels, but for some reason they don't seem to come to me as easily as I would expect. Interestingly, I once had the thought that if I ever encountered a ghost, I would not judge it as negative or dangerous, and I would always help it move into the light. The very next night, I felt the presence of a spirit in my home, and I successfully guided it into the light. However, when I call on angels, I don't seem to feel their presence in the same way. What can I do to make that connection stronger and clearer? So, the first thing I would say is good job for realizing that you had that ability. And before I answer the question, I do want to say that when I cross spirits over, I don't send them to the light because I know this isn't the question, but this is really important. Because there's a false light out there. There are many different types of lights, and it is, as I say, above my pay grade to know where a spirit needs to go. The higher self of that spirit, the soul, the oversoul, whatever you want to call it, they know. And so my process for helping a spirit move over is to call on their higher self to retrieve them and take it back to where it serves their highest good. So I just want to comment on that. And I don't know who this person is, but I get a feeling about people's abilities. And I feel very strongly, whoever you are, that you have strong abilities and that your purpose is in part to assist earthbound spirits. That is partly why I think you had such an easy time doing it. And the first time I ever crossed an earthbound spirit, it's kind of funny. I was doing an energy work session on a friend, and I realized that she did have a spirit attached to her, and I told her about it, but I didn't know what to do with it at the time. And she was upset, and she was saying, "Get it out of me, get it out of me." And I said, I don't know how to do that. And the next thing I knew, it was coming up my arm, and I felt it enter my chest. And suddenly I got information from spirit on how to help that spirit move on. And then I've taught it to hundreds of people since then, and it keeps working. So we all have an ability to do this. That you recognize it on your own is phenomenal. The spirits that are earthbound are much easier to feel than angels in a lot of cases. The subtlety of the angelic realm is much harder to palpate, to feel. And their messages are often more indirect. The earthbound spirit is, I think, kind of closer, you could say, to where we are here in this physical realm. They're just, it's the same as being alive with a body, except their body's gone and their energy's still hanging out, so they're still here. They're just a little bit outside of our vibrational frequency without a body, but not completely. Like an angel, like way up here, right? And we're here maybe, and then an earthbound spirit might be like right there. So they're closer. I'm oversimplifying, but they're closer to us in proximity, and so we feel them more easily. Additionally, their energy is it is denser. It's I'll answer your question in just a minute. Um, it- it's for lack of a better way to say denser, it's thicker, it's more palpable, it's easier to feel than the high vibration energy of an angel. And then on top of that, if your upper chakras aren't attuned, aren't open and developed, then the ability to perceive the higher vibrational entities like angels and archangels and all that, it's not going to be as strong. And so the key to that is to keep working on opening the chakras. And there's a myriad of ways that we do that. I wrote an article on opening the chakras as well. That's on the blog. So, angels are just not as easy to feel. And so thanking them, doing research about how guardian angels work and how spirit guides work, the subtleties of how they work through other people, how they work through just like number synchronicities, music coming on at a certain time. They give us very subtle messages that are really easy to miss. And a lot of people think that they don't have a guardian angel around. So many people contact me. They're like, my guardian angel left me. I'm like, no, you just don't feel it right now. Grief, lower vibrational emotions, they will block our ability to perceive information from spirit. And just again, to simplify, well, if you haven't ever looked at the vibration emotional frequency chart, look that up. Because with applied kinesiology or muscle testing, they gave numbers to different emotions. So say like down at the bottom is shame and they gave it a number, and up at the top is enlightenment and joy, and they gave that a higher number, like 700, and maybe down here is like, I don't know, 5. I haven't looked at the chart in a while. You get the point though. Lower emotions, anger, fear, doubt, grief, all that stuff down here. Higher vibrational emotions, joy, enlightenment, gratitude, much closer to spirit in vibration. And so if you're having like a lot of people who've lost a loved one, they're like, I don't feel them anymore. I just don't, I mean, I don't feel them at all, or I don't feel my angels anymore. And it's just that's why it's just a vibrational mismatch. So the answer is to learn to raise your vibration. I write a lot of articles. There's an article about raising your vibrations as well. And those energy exercises that I'm going to include, the link to the lady demonstrating them, that I'm going to include with this recording, is a great way to start raising your vibration. So basically just tuning out of the negative thoughts that are repetitive, um, and smiling and finding something to be grateful for is a great way to start retuning that. And I'm not saying that your vibration is low, whoever asked this question. I'm just saying it does apply to a lot of people that for some reason they're a vibrational mismatch for spirit. And so it could be one of the reasons for not feeling the angelic realm as much. All right. I think that is it for the questions, but let's see, there's one here that you asked me in the chat. Let me open that up. My glasses on. Oh, what is the false light? Oh gosh. Well, this is a big one. There are not the only entities here. There are what they call negative entities, or some people call them demonic entities, that I'll start by saying they can only work through humans. They're not strong like we are. They don't have the creative power that we have. They can only work through us. And they appreciate the vibrations of the lower vibrational emotions, the lower emotions, fear, anger. They will um, try to get people to feel those things because we emit a frequency of energy from our structure, from our body, from our heart, from our thoughts or creating things. And so when we're creating these frequencies that are the lower vibrational emotions, they feed off of them basically. And they, like I said, can only create here through humans, and they do embody some humans. And their goal is to keep people recycling back into this reality when it's not necessarily in their best interest. We should always have a choice to choose the next place we go, and a guide will never guilt us into repeating a life here in this realm. It should always be our choice. But it's not always our choice. I mean, we don't always make that choice wisely because sometimes we are either guided to a false light or well, guided to a false light. And sometimes we'll just keep reincarnating back into this realm, even though maybe that's not exactly what we wanted to do. I had a life between life hypnosis. If you want to know more about how that works, there's a guy named Michael Newton. I think he's gone now, but he wrote several books. One's called The Destiny of Souls, and one's called The Journey of Souls. And he was a hypnotherapist, regressed tens of thousands of people back to their life between life state, like their spirit state before they incarnated. And he got really similar stories from people over and over again. And when I had mine, I I was told when I picked this place, they gave me a choice of several different places, and I could pick where I wanted to go, and I picked this one, and I was very they were very serious when they cautioned me about coming here, and they said uh, a lot of people go to this one to help, and they don't make it out for several lifetimes because they get caught up in the fear and in the guilt, and they recycle several times, sometimes before they come back out. And they warned me about that, and I was like, yeah, whatever. So I don't know how long I've been here. I know I think maybe more than I wanted to be, because at the end of the session, my dad pushed a garbage can over to me, and a reference to me vomiting after riding a roller coaster several times. So I think that he was trying to tell me this is going to be a really rough realm. So that's kind of a compressed answer. I could probably talk for hours about these entities, but basically, it's a recycling to try to get people to come back and not have free will about where they go next. And so I never, ever, ever try to send anybody to the light. Again, it's just beyond what I know. I can't see that from here. And so I figured the oversoul knows how to do that. And that's how I was guided to do it. And then when I went to a mentor and said, hey, this is what I'm doing, and it seems to be working, because I was working with a lady whose kid kept seeing spirits in the hallway. And whenever I would do this command to the higher self to come get the spirit, the kid would be like, all gone. And so when I got to a mentor, and so what am I doing? She was like, yeah, that's exactly what happens. And the way that you're doing it, she studied in a mystery school. And so that's the way that they actually will be free. Let's see, I think you put another question in. Let me take a look here. Do I have any recommendations for research on how to successfully cross over when we pass? Do you mean like research on things we can do in life to help us cross over more easily? Or do you mean helping people who are already dead that need help crossing? So I'm not really sure what the question is asking. Research on how to successfully cross over when we pass. Dan Winter is one of the people who talks a lot about this, who I follow. And if that's what you're asking is how do we prepare ourselves? The way I'm doing it is by working on having out of body experiences, learning how to successfully control the soul while the body is still alive is, I think, a really important thing. Lucid dreaming, learning the process of lucid dreaming can be really helpful. And the way that, so I've been studying Dan Winter for a long time, and the way that he talks about this, and I believe this to be true, is bliss actually causes that implosion in our hearts and in our brains that is the required basically propulsion for us to get out of here. And he says for us to be able to take consciousness through death and remember this life and make a conscious decision about where we're going next, it requires that we not have anger or lower vibrational emotions as prominent at the time of death. Now, does that mean that some people who die, who are suffering and in anguish, that they're not going to have that freedom? It does not mean that. It means that if you're living the majority of your life, basically feeling angry, resentful, shameful, any of those things, then literally you won't have the power to get out in the same way. And that's how souls get stuck. And so basically it's a process of learning to raise your vibration throughout life. And that's what I've been doing. And I went from, I'll just say, I was a mess for many, many, many years of my life. And it was through cleaning up my body, doing energy work, learning about spirituality, and then refocusing. Every time I came up on something negative or worrisome, I would refocus my mind to something I was grateful for. And it changed my whole life to do that. And it made me more psychic as well. Um, and so that one of the things I learned as well is that we part of my process for crossing spirits over is to achieve a state of basically as blissful as you can get, because that bliss, again, it causes that implosion that a spirit needs to get out of here successfully. And you can just think of it almost like as a rocket on the back of them, like to push them out. And and so we can create that for an earthbound spirit. We can create that bridge for them using bliss. So the answer is energy and emotional hygiene. Get your energy straight, get your thoughts higher vibrational, spend the majority of your life seeking and being in gratitude and being of service in whatever way you can. And it doesn't mean you're not going to have hard times, but that seems to be the answer to how to do it. And don't calcify your pineal gland with sugar and fluoride and alcohol and ultra processed foods. It's and chemicals as well. All that stuff's really important.